on this computer.
Got it, got it.
Okay, we're recording, which means we're live. How's it going?
It's going.
Normally we do the pre-talk before we hit record, but I thought for this one we would do the pre-talk as part of the actual interview to give people a sneak peek into behind the scenes. How's that sound?
Well, sure, why not? Then I'm glad I put on a head wrap because otherwise I was sideshow bobbing this morning. So,
Oh, I would have liked to have seen that.
mm,
Well, I put on a hat myself, so we were maybe on the same page.
most likely. Cool.
Okay, so we're gonna normally do a quick intro and then ask you to do a good quick intro. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I can
Like
do that.
who you are, what you stand for, anything, anything you want to say.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's do this. Hey everyone, this is Daniel and Candela coming to you again with another installment of Interview with a Marketer. I am pleased to be here with Sharmin Kent. Welcome, Sharmin. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's a tough question because you're so many things, but can you introduce yourself and describe a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Sharmin Kent. I am the content strategy lead at Studio Science. We're a design and innovation firm here in Indianapolis. My job is essentially word nerding at a 400 level, I suppose. I work with a lot of different brands to help them figure out their brand messaging, positioning, brand strategy, along with brand writing. I've been in Indianapolis tech for at least 10 years. I've been a content marketer for most of that time, but now I feel more marketing adjacent with focusing on content and brand strategy.
That was an excellent introduction. Um, my giant dog is drinking right now, right next to me. He drinks like once a day, and when it does, he gets in gallons. So, can you hear that in the background?
No, not really. And even if I could, let him live, damn it.
I am. I am gonna let him live. He's a good dog. I was snooping on you in LinkedIn. You've had a really diverse career, not just in tech and content, but um, writing in other areas, not just B2B, also an educator. And then before we hit record, I know you've been talking more about diversity, and I'm guessing a lot of people are coming to you to help figure out how to solve that in tech. Not that it's your problem, but I'm guessing people are still coming to you.
Yeah, it is a problem. It is certainly not my problem, but it is still a problem that affects me. So yeah, the idea of solving the problem of diversity is always a chewy one because there's not really a problem with diversity. There's a problem with homogeneity. Like it's not that we're having problems being more diverse. It's that the people in charge are making it hard to be diverse. And it comes out in the work. You know what I mean? It turns out that if you have the same people doing the same things all the time, then a lot of creative work starts to look the same. Um, Luckily, marketing, a lot of companies are starting to realize that the more they diversify their teams, the better their results are, and the more they can reach out to more customers, more users, more audience members. So, slowly but surely, it's happening. I guess I am part of helping, but
Hmm.
only because of where I am. It's kind of part of the job.
Yeah. Well, could you describe what role are you playing? Because you just said it is certainly not your issue to solve, but your people are still coming to you. So can you maybe describe what is that role?
I feel like at this stage in my career, I can serve kind of an informal advisory role, whereas before I was always the only one in the room. Some of my friends and I liken it to being like the red shirt on Star Trek. Like you're the one they send down to make sure that everything is okay before they send everybody else down. Being the only person of color, especially being the only woman of color in a room, means that you kind of have to represent everything to everyone and represent yourself, which is a
Hmm.
lot. And I played that role a lot, especially in the earlier roles that I had here in B2B Martech in Indie in startup land. But now that there are more startups, there are more companies, so there's more opportunity for these companies to hire less white folks, less, fewer, more diverse people. Um, and just helping those younger folks navigate the world, because that's hard too. I mean, it's one thing to be
Hmm.
the only person in the room, the only one in the room, but it's quite another to only be one of two and still have to navigate having someone that you identify with, but still having to navigate how homogeneous, how boring
Hmm.
everything is sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well put. Also, Star Wars, Star Trek reference. Well done there.
Thanks. That's what I'm here for.
Um, do you think it's getting better, especially as you reflect on your career?
I do. But I think that's happened for a few different reasons. One, indie has been really, really good about finding and nurturing talent. We've got a ton of really talented people. We have a ton of really talented and committed leaders, yourself included. And we all tend to be really invested in the people that we work with, right? So that's part of it. And then those of us who have recognized that things need to change, we're doing the work incrementally. We're doing the work to bring the right people on and to expose executives to different ways of thinking through different people. So yeah, the TLDR is it is getting better. Things are becoming more diverse, but it's slow because people don't like change. Even in startup land, even in
Hmm.
technology where things move at this breakneck pace, it's really difficult to get folks to change certain ways of thinking.
Yep, yep. It's its own culture for sure. I see that. Well, thank you for being um, direct and open with me on that, and recognizing that you know the role that you're playing is one of advisor. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's really important.
It took me a while to get here. It's because I gave a talk earlier this week about how being a black woman in tech is doing more than one job. Like, I have to set up an environment where people are comfortable with me before I can even do my work. So sometimes part of my job is making sure that other folks are comfortable with change. And sometimes that change is just a new person being there, a new kind of person, a new kind of thinking. And that can be threatening to folks. And that makes it difficult for progress to be made.
Yeah,
So anywhere I can ease things, um, I am happy to.
yeah. Well, thank you. It's been it's something I have thought about, and I don't have the answers, and I'm sure I've made plenty of mistakes. But it's been eye opening to think really I need to look at myself before going to the one black person I work with to ask their advice. I think
Yeah.
that I mean I think those conversations are critical, but just looking at my own privilege and you know I'm an average white man that has done well, and I was I was giving opportunities and paths that others did not get, and so that is an ongoing practice and commitment that is hard but essential.
Yes, absolutely necessary. Um, Please work on yourself first. I say this all the time. Google is free. Like,
Hmm.
Google is the most powerful tool we have, and in some ways it can help like deprogram white supremacy. Please look for other people's stories before putting the burden on the nearest person of color
Yeah.
to educate you. That is exhausting. So use that privilege and use it to access information before asking someone to spend energy on educating you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let's transition. You mentioned in your intro you're a nerd. Nerd was part of a description, and then you mentioned Star Trek. So I am gonna I'm gonna use a terrible B2B terminology. I'm gonna pull on that thread,
Let's unravel that thread.
and we
You've
can circle
worked,
back.
yeah, you've worked with Mitch Fraser, haven't you? Um, I am a nerd in several different ways. One, I'm a sci-fi nerd, like hardcore sci-fi nerd. Star Trek, tangentially,
Yep.
more because of a lot of the literary references that were made in the original TV show and in a lot of the spin-off books that have happened recently, but mostly like classical sci-fi. So I studied sci-fi and fantasy in grad school. I did my master's thesis on the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, which is not worth discussing here. Um, but sci-fi is like my happy place. So authors like Octavia Butler, especially black sci-fi. So Octavia Butler, Jewel Gomez, Samuel Delaney, those are the kinds of folks that I grew up reading. And then I am a music nerd, huge
Hmm.
music nerd. My dad is a musician, so I grew up with the world's best record collection, and just I love music. I can nerd out about music for hours. And then kind of a food nerd, I guess.
Mm.
I love eating well and cooking and sort of getting into the science of cooking. I could watch YouTube food shows for hours. My son and I will watch shows on Netflix, like cooking shows, Chef's Table. Um, yeah,
I love that. Yeah,
I love learning about things that make me happy.
as you should. Well, maybe not in this Zoom, but let's talk more sci-fi outside of this. I'm also a nerd, and
Gotcha.
you are lucky in that, not lucky, but you get to work on the more creative sides of marketing, and that is content and messaging and branding, brand strategy, all of that. How do you bring in some of your personal interests like science fiction and music and food into your creative B2B side?
That's an interesting question because it's always hard to make software, like B2B software, like sexy or like catchy, um, because it either feels really forced and try too hard
Hmm.
or it just sounds silly. So a lot of it depends on the context of the client. Like some of the clients, we've got a client right now that is, I'm not going to say any client names, but the client is really fun, even though the product is relatively dry. So, working with sometimes like the leadership of a company to figure out what their personality is, that's the fun part. Bringing like the human to something that is so inherently like dry and bloodless. And then sometimes it's just trying to find a way to get into the user's brain, right? Sometimes it's about the product, and then sometimes it's all about the people or the kinds of people who use the product. So, getting into the heads of those people, finding a human way
Hmm.
into things. Um, I don't know if that answers the question, particularly because it can be really challenging to be creative with software. Um, but that's half the battle. Like that's a good portion of the job is taking this ephemeral group of ones and zeros and giving it a personality that people would want to buy or join.
Yep. Um, Branding is, I think branding is the most important thing in marketing, but often the most misunderstood. So, I don't know if you do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Let's argue, or let's celebrate together.
I think part of the deal, right, is that brand is such a nebulous term. It's super squishy. Um, with B2B in particular, if we're still on B2B as a subject, because even though you're still selling person to person, there's this entity behind B2B where you have to think of more than one audience. Whereas with B2C, you can talk
Hmm.
directly to somebody. So, yeah. And then in software, there's like brand versus product. And it happens in B2C too, where the brand and the product can be separate things or they can be the same thing. And then how do you navigate like communicating a brand promise or a brand personality of something that's so big?
Hmm.
Yeah. Brand is
Yeah,
brand is really, really tough to categorize.
yeah, and I think if you've never, I completely agree. And if you've never really worked in it, it can be incredibly intimidating as well.
Yeah, it's huge. And to be in charge of somebody's brand, even on a like working for an agency like I do, I take somebody's brand, like they trust me with their baby, and sometimes I have to tell them their baby is ugly. And then I give their baby back and I walk away.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're working with a company, like if you're in-house, um, that's yours. That is your child and you're responsible for it.
All right. Let's see, a fun question for you if you can answer it. Your top three and least favorite three things about the B2B space.
Whew.
What do you like
Three?
about it, and what drives you nuts? Or one.
I'll say I'll say this first one is the best and the worst. Um, it is very challenging, and I've already said it, but it is very challenging to be creative in B2B. That's the best thing and the worst thing because as a creative, as somebody as using the word creative as a noun, I like a challenge. I love challenging, crunchy clients. At the same time, it can be really tough if you have a client or a company that's new in their category or they're trying to create a new category or um, they're in the middle of a digital transformation and it's 2022 and you guys are just now starting to get to the point where you think technology should be a central pillar of your platform. It can be really tough. So that kills two birds with one stone. um, I think the two things that I like the least about B2B, one is everybody relies on the same formula. It seems like, excuse me, a lot of B2B products tend to be a solution in search of a problem. And that can be really difficult to shape a brand around. Like, who's asking for this? If no one's asking for this, then why are you trying to make it happen? That can be tough. Another thing that I'm not terribly fond of is, frankly, how male oriented B2B can be, particularly around sales. And the way B2B sales and marketing are set up, at least in the way that I've experienced it coming up through my career, is that marketing is female centered and sales is male
Hmm.
centered. Um, and I mean, I've worked for software companies that focused specifically on sales, like sales and marketing software. So I've had to deal with salespeople a lot in a lot of different capacities. It's just a lot of, there are a lot of mismatched energies, and I would
Hmm.
love to see B2B, particularly B2B SaaS, address how we can be we can serve our customers better by being more empathetic, if that makes any sense.
Yep, makes total sense.
The other two things I love about B2B, one is that it's always changing. Like, on one hand, everything stays the same, but on the other hand, everything changes about B2B because it changes so rapidly. There's a lot of opportunity for new solutions to be made. Speaking to solution in search of a problem, sometimes there are problems that are just really, really tough to get at, and software can help solve some of those problems. Um, I think my other favorite part is that I can do my job literally from anywhere. I'm wearing yoga
Hmm.
pants and a head wrap. Like, I'm gonna do yoga after this. Like, I I have an opportunity to work in an environment where I'm good at what I do. I work with really, really, really smart people, and we solve some really tough problems. And I can literally do it from anywhere.
Yeah,
That's a perk.
yeah, love it. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so we've talked a little bit about writing, a little bit about brand. Wanted to get your thoughts as an educator as well,
Mm.
and what what drew you to that field? Um, why do you do it? That kind of stuff.
Well, when I started undergrad, I had this lofty idea that I would be a literature professor, that I would get a doctorate in like black science fiction or something really specialized. The kinds of degrees that nobody really gets anymore, or they cost like $250,000 to get. And then I got to undergrad and realized that that was just not for me. And through grad school, I still thought maybe I wanted to get a doctorate and become a traditional, like, literature professor. It just didn't work out that way. And then once I got into tech, I had some fits and starts in my career, and I used that as an opportunity to go back and teach. And it was so cool, except for everything else that you have to do as an educator. And I now I've always respected the profession, but I definitely respect the profession enough to understand that I don't necessarily have the stamina for it. Particularly in higher education. You have so much to do. You're planning your classes, you are counseling your students, you're sometimes navigating really weird, unnecessary gang warfare like politics, depending on which department you're in. Um, it's just a lot. And I love education, and I wish it, in the future I would love to go back. Um, but right now, I think I will do what I can to educate in a less formal sense
Hmm.
where
Yep,
I am now.
yep, completely understand. And the less formal is that, um, does that go back to what you're saying about the advisory role, or do you mentor and coach others? How are you doing that?
I I do what I can. I try to get involved with Next Tech pretty regularly throughout the year. So wherever I can do like catapult stuff, or
Hmm.
Next Tech does a an annual virtual conference called Navigate. So this will be the second year I think that I've done Navigate. I also, through my tenure at Kenzie Academy, found a lot of really smart students, and I mentor as many former students as I can. I just try to be there for folks who need guidance, particularly black and brown folks,
Yep.
particularly queer folks. Um, in Indianapolis, in Indiana, it is really important to me that the industry where I've made so much of my life starts to look more like me, and that the younger folks who are coming up feel like they have a real place here. So that's where I put most of my energy when I can.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you for everything you've shared today. It's I've you know we don't know each other that well. I've known of you for years and followed you socially. We have worked together as a client. Um, so it's fun to actually sit down and actually hear more about your life. So I wanted to just say that and say thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being listened to.
Yeah, it's you're an easy person to listen to.
Thanks.
I don't want to stand in the way of you getting to do yoga. Um, so we're gonna wrap up here. Um, what's next for you?
Um, that's a large question.
Hmm.
Um, Aside from the yoga, I, for me, it's getting deeper into what I'm doing now. So I've only been at Studio Science for a year and 9 months, maybe. January will be my 2 year,
Yep.
and this is the most interesting job I've ever had for a lot of different reasons. And so I feel like the next step for me is really digging in and figuring out how I can work with our really cool, really interesting clients
Yep.
and find ways to bring out their messaging to um, basically, this sounds kind of selfish, but sharpen my craft by working with really cool brands who have really cool problems to solve.
Yep.
So I'm very happy where I am, and I just want to do more.
Love it. Love it. Okay. What are you watching right now that I
Ooh,
should watch?
okay. Couple shows.
Okay.
One, The Patient on Hulu. So I think we're about 4 episodes in at this point, or we will be. Um, it's Steve Carell and Donald Gleason. I won't give too much away,
Okay.
um, but it's a very fraught relationship between a therapist and his patient. Um,
Okay.
if you have not watched it, P Valley, both seasons, season two just wrapped a few weeks back. It is a strip club in Mississippi, black strip club in Mississippi. My dad is from Minter City, Mississippi, just outside of Greenwood. So anything having to do with real type Mississippi
Hmm.
folks, I absolutely love. Um, it is a lot if you are not familiar with Southern culture, but it is an excellent primer.
Okay.
Um, what else am I watching right now? That's really all I can think of. Otherwise, I watch horrible YouTube web series and like The Dodo with like cute dogs and cats with no tails. Like sometimes I just need that to like scrub my brain.
We all need that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Lovely chatting with you.
Likewise.
I'm going to sign off.